Ever wonder how quickly love can turn to rage? It's exactly 3 seconds. That's how long it took from seeing my 8-year-old daughter's tears to feeling something snap inside me that can never be repaired. I'm Elise, 34, a financial advisor who specializes in family wealth management in Connecticut. The irony of helping families preserve their legacies while watching mine crumble isn't lost on me. It was supposed to be a celebration, my mother-in-law's 60th birthday, a milestone event at their sprawling colonial home in the good part of town. The part where old money whispers through manicured hedges and tradition is more important than people's feelings, especially if those people are little girls with curls that don't match the family aesthetic. My husband James and I have been married for 10 years. He's white, I'm black, and our daughter Zoe is a perfect blend of us both. Warm golden brown skin, a brilliant smile, and the most glorious crown of curls you've ever seen. Curls that apparently ruined his mother's vision for the party. I should have known something was wrong when we arrived. Catherine, my mother-in-law, greeted us with that thin-lipped smile that never reaches her eyes. Her gaze lingered on Zoe's hair, which I'd spent an hour styling into a beautiful arrangement of natural curls, adorned with a headband that matched her dress. "Oh," Catherine said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I thought you might do something with her hair for the photographs." James squeezed my hand in warning. After years of these comments, we had a system. He'd squeeze my hand, I'd swallow my response, and we'd move on. "Her hair is done," I replied calmly. "She looks beautiful." Catherine's smile tightened further. "Of course she does, dear. I just meant something more. Appropriate for formal pictures." By right appropriate, I knew exactly what she meant. Straight, less black, less like me, and more like them. I felt Zoe's small hand slip into mine, her grip tightening. At 8 years old, she was already learning to navigate these microaggressions, a concept no child should have to understand. "We should head inside," James said, expertly diffusing the tension. "Mom, the decorations look amazing." And they did. The house was transformed into a showcase of Catherine's expensive taste. Crystal centerpieces, white roses, silver candelabras, and a color scheme so deliberately neutral it felt sterile. This wasn't a home for living. It was a stage for performing wealth. Dinner was announced at precisely 6 o'clock. The adults were directed to the formal dining room, while the children were sent to a table set up in the adjacent sunroom. A normal arrangement for a family gathering with many children. Except when we entered the dining room, I noticed all the other children were already seated at the adults' table. "Where's the kids' hard table?" I asked, looking around in confusion. Catherine exchanged glances with James's sister Elizabeth. "We thought it would be nice for the family to sit together tonight." "Then where is Zoe supposed to sit?" I asked, that familiar knot forming in my stomach. Catherine looked past me, addressing James instead. "We set up a special place for Zoe. In the laundry room. It's quiet in there, and she can eat her dinner in peace." The room went silent. Even the other guests, aunts, uncles, cousins who'd watched Zoe grow up, looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. "The laundry room," I repeated, certain I'd misheard. "It's just that we're taking formal photographs during dinner," Elizabeth chimed in. Her voice was gentle, as if she were explaining something reasonable. "The photographer is very expensive, and with Zoe's hair being so big today, it might distract from the aesthetic we're going for." I looked at James, waiting for him to say something, anything, to defend our daughter. His face was flushed with embarrassment, but the words that came out weren't what I expected. "It's just for the photos, Elise," he murmured. "It's Mom's special day." In that moment, I felt like I was underwater, sounds muffled, vision blurring at the edges. I watched as Catherine's housekeeper led my daughter, my beautiful girl in her carefully chosen dress and perfect curls, toward the laundry room off the kitchen. A room with no windows, fluorescent lighting, and the lingering smell of detergent. I started to follow, but James caught my arm. "Don't make a scene," he whispered. "We'll make it up to her later. Make it up to her, for segregating her, for teaching her that her appearance made her unworthy of sitting with her family." But I didn't make a scene. God help me, I sat down at that table. I accepted a glass of wine. I smiled emptily as Catherine held court, talking about her charity work and upcoming cruise, all while my daughter ate alone, surrounded by washing machines and laundry detergent. 20 minutes later, when I couldn't bear it anymore, I excused myself to check on Zoe. I found her sitting on a folding chair at a small table that had been hastily covered with a clean pillowcase in lieu of a tablecloth. Her plate was barely touched. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Mommy," she whispered when she saw me. "Do I look dirty? Is that why Grandma won't let me eat with everyone?" Something inside me shattered, completely and irrevocably. "No, baby," I said, kneeling beside her. "You are perfect exactly as you are. Grandma is wrong, not you. Never you." I took her hand. "Come on, we're leaving." We walked through the kitchen, past the startled staff, and into the dining room where the photographer was directing everyone to smile. The flash went off just as we entered, capturing, I imagine, the exact moment I stopped caring about keeping the peace. "We're leaving," I announced. My voice steadied despite the rage pulsing through me. James looked mortified. "Elise, please." "Your daughter was crying in the laundry room because she thinks her hair makes her look dirty," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "So we're leaving." Catherine stood up, napkin clutched in her manicured hand. "Really, Elise, you're overreacting. It's just dinner, and the photographs are important to me. More important than your granddaughter's dignity." The room fell silent. "James," I said, turning to my husband, "Are you coming with us?" The hesitation, the split second where he looked between his mother and me, told me everything I needed to know. "I should stay," he said quietly. "Mom only turned 60 once." I nodded, a strange calm replacing the fury. "You're right. Some moments you can't get back." I turned to Catherine, who stood with her chin raised defiantly. "I thank you for showing me exactly who you are and what you think of my daughter." We left without another word. Zoe's small hand clutched in mine. In the car, she asked questions I couldn't answer. Why didn't Daddy come with us? Why did Grandma think her hair was bad? Would it be better if her hair was straight like her cousin's? That night, after Zoe finally fell asleep, I sat alone in our kitchen. On the counter in front of me was a checkbook, the one I used for the special account I'd set up years ago, when I'd first noticed Catherine's subtle comments about Zoe's appearance. Every time she'd mentioned straightening Zoe's hair, every time she'd given her hair products meant for taming curls, every time she'd sighed and said, "Wouldn't she look pretty if..." I'd put money into that account. A petty gesture, perhaps, but it had kept me sane. What Catherine didn't know, what none of them knew, was that for the past 5 years, I'd been quietly funding their family gatherings. The Christmas parties, the 4th of July barbecues, the birthday celebrations, even tonight's event. James came from old money, but his parents had lost most of it in bad investments years ago. Their lifestyle, the colonial house, the country club membership, the appearance of wealth, was largely subsidized by our success. By my success, specifically. My financial planning practice had taken off while James's architectural firm struggled through the economic downturn. Catherine had approached me 5 years ago, embarrassed but pragmatic. Could I help them temporarily with some expenses, just until they got back on their feet? I'd agreed, partly out of genuine desire to help family, partly because I believed in preserving the environment Zoe would grow up visiting. I never told James the full extent of my financial support. Catherine had insisted it remain between us girls. Now I understood why. The checks had started small, a few thousand for property taxes, then country club dues, then staff for parties. Eventually, it evolved into an arrangement where I funded their social events. The very events where Catherine would comment on my daughter's appearance, question my parenting, and subtly remind everyone that I wasn't really one of them. I'd written a check for $12,000 for tonight's party, for the photographer who couldn't bear to capture my daughter in his expensive photos, for the caterer who served her dinner in the laundry room, for the flowers that were apparently more deserving of a seat at the table than my child. I stared at the checkbook, a plan forming in my mind. Not a rash, emotional response, but something more calculated. Something that would make a point in the language Catherine understood best, money and social standing. When James came home at midnight, he found me still at the kitchen table, but the checkbook was gone, and my laptop was open. "Elise," he began, his voice placating. "I know you're upset, but you embarrassed Mom in front of everyone." I looked up at him, suddenly seeing him with perfect clarity, not as the man I'd fallen in love with, but as someone who'd been shaped by Catherine's values. Someone who would always choose the appearance of harmony over actual justice. "I embarrassed her," I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "Our daughter ate dinner in a laundry room because her hair was too ethnic for the photographs, and I embarrassed your mother." James ran a hand through his hair. "You're making it sound worse than it was. It was just for the photos." Just for an hour or so. An hour that taught our daughter she's less worthy than her white cousins. An hour that taught her that her appearance, her beautiful, natural hair, is something to be hidden away. "You're being dramatic," he sighed. "Mom didn't mean it that way." I closed my laptop. "Did you check on Zoe when you came in?" He had the decency to look ashamed. I didn't want to wake her. She cried herself to sleep asking if Grandma hates her because she's brown. James paled. "She didn't say that." "She did. And you weren't here to tell her otherwise because you were too busy celebrating the woman who made her feel that way." I stood up, suddenly exhausted. "I'm going to bed. We'll talk tomorrow." But as I walked past him, James caught my arm. "Wait, where's the checkbook for the family account? Mom mentioned wanting to discuss the holiday party plans while everyone's in town tomorrow." I smiled, a cold, mirthless smile. "I moved the money." "You what?" "I transferred every penny from that account into a new one. In Zoe's name, for her future therapy bills." James's face contorted with alarm. "Elise, you can't do that. Mom's already put deposits down for the holiday events. The family relies on that account." "Not anymore," I said quietly. Not after tonight. You're punishing everyone because you're angry with Mom. I'm teaching our daughter that she has a mother who will stand up for her, even when her father won't." I left him standing in the kitchen and went upstairs to sleep in Zoe's room, curled protectively around my daughter. In the morning, we would have decisions to make, boundaries to establish. But for now, I just listened to her breathing. Each inhale and exhale a reminder of what truly mattered. My phone started buzzing at 7 a.m. Catherine, then Elizabeth, then James's father. I silenced it without looking at the messages. They could wait. Instead, I gently woke Zoe and asked if she'd like to go to IHOP for pancakes, her favorite weekend treat. As we sat across from each other in a booth, her face sticky with syrup, her curls bouncing as she excitedly told me about a book she was reading at school, I made a silent promise. Never again would I allow anyone to make her feel less than. Not Catherine, not James, not anyone. My phone buzzed again. This time I glanced at it. "James, Mom's hysterical. Says you promised to fund the holiday party. We need to talk." I put the phone away and focused on Zoe's smile, on the resilience already evident in her 8-year-old shoulders, on the knowledge that while I couldn't protect her from every hurt the world might inflict, I could show her what it looked like to refuse to fund her own degradation. The holiday party was still months away. Catherine had plenty of time to find a new financial backer. Or perhaps, for once, they could host a gathering where my daughter's worth wasn't calculated against the aesthetic of the family photos. Either way, it wouldn't be my check on the cake anymore. The weekend after Catherine's birthday party passed in tense silence. James slept in the guest room without me having to ask him to, which was both a relief and somehow more infuriating. He was angry enough to avoid me, but not angry enough to confront the real issue. By Monday morning, I'd received 27 text messages from various members of his family. I read none of them. Instead, I focused on getting Zoe ready for school, making sure her favorite cereal was in her bowl, and her curls were styled exactly how she liked them, half up, half down, with 2 small butterfly clips she'd picked out herself. "Is Daddy mad at us?" she asked as I packed her lunch. The question caught me off guard. "Why do you ask that, sweetie?" "Because he's not eating breakfast with us, and he was talking on the phone really late, and he sounded mad." Children miss nothing. It's one of the first lessons of parenting, yet somehow we forget it over and over. "Daddy and I have some grown-up things to figure out," I said carefully. "But none of it is your fault, and none of it changes how much we both love you." She nodded, accepting this in the way children do, cataloging it alongside other mysteries of the adult world to be examined later. After dropping Zoe at school, I drove to my office downtown. My financial advisory firm occupied the top floor of a renovated factory building, exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a view of the river. I'd built this business from scratch after leaving a soul-crushing job at a major investment bank. 5 years of 70-hour weeks, of missed weekends and late nights, had culminated in a thriving practice with over $50 million in assets under management. I was good at what I did. Damn good. And part of that was because I understood family dynamics around money, the unspoken expectations, the power plays, the way financial decisions reflected deeper values. I helped clients navigate not just numbers, but emotions. The irony that I'd failed to apply this expertise to my own family situation wasn't lost on me. My assistant Maya handed me a coffee as I walked in. "Your 9 o'clock is waiting in the conference room," she said, then lowered her voice. "And Mrs. Walker-Johnson has called 4 times already this morning." She wouldn't tell me what it's about, just that it's urgent. Mrs. Walker-Johnson, Catherine's formal name, the one she insisted on using in professional settings to emphasize her connection to both prominent families. "If she calls again, tell her I'm with clients all day," I replied. "Take a message and say I'll get back to her when I can." Maya nodded, her expression neutral but her eyes curious. She'd met my in-laws at the firm's holiday party last year and had witnessed Catherine's particular brand of polite condescension firsthand. I threw myself into work with a focus that bordered on obsession. Client meetings, portfolio reviews, a lunch presentation to a group of newly divorced women learning to manage their finances for the first time. By 4 o'clock, I was reviewing the draft of a financial plan for a family looking to fund 3 college educations when Maya knocked on my door. "I'm sorry to interrupt she said, "but there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment and she's insistent." Before I could ask who, Catherine appeared behind Maya, brushing past her into my office as if she'd been invited. "Really, Elise," she said, settling herself in the chair across from my desk without waiting for permission. "Is this childish game of avoiding my calls necessary?" I nodded to Maya, who closed the door behind her with a sympathetic glance in my direction. "I've been working, Catherine," I said, keeping my voice professionally neutral. "What can I help you with?" She looked around my office, taking in the awards on the wall, the framed photo of Zoe on my desk, the view of the river. Her expression was one I recognized, a mixture of reluctant admiration and resentment that I, the outsider, had achieved such success. "You know perfectly well why I'm here," she said finally. "The family account. Elizabeth already placed deposits for the holiday party at the club. And now you've... What? Closed the account? Moved the money?" I set down my pen and faced her directly. "Yes, I've moved the funds into a trust for Zoe's education." Catherine's face flushed. "You had no right. That account was for family expenses. It was my money, Catherine. I have every right to allocate it as I see fit. We had an arrangement that became null and void the moment you made my daughter eat in the laundry room because her appearance embarrassed you." Catherine's eyes narrowed. "You're blowing that completely out of proportion. It was a special occasion. The photographs were important. More important than a child's dignity? Than her sense of belonging in her own family? She's not..." Catherine stopped herself abruptly. The unfinished sentence hung between us, its meaning unmistakable. "She's not really family. Not really one of us." I leaned forward. "She's not what, Catherine? Not white enough for your family portraits? Not straight-haired enough to sit at your table? Please, finish your thought." She had the grace to look momentarily ashamed before rallying. "I was going to say she's not old enough to understand the importance of certain social traditions, but you're determined to paint me as some sort of monster. Social traditions like segregation. Those went out of fashion quite some time ago." Catherine pressed her lips into a thin line. "Your insistence on viewing everything through the lens of race is exhausting, Elise. This had nothing to do with Zoe being mixed. It was about the photographs looking cohesive. And her hair disrupted that cohesion because..." She sighed dramatically. "Because it was wild and untamed. Because it would stand out in what was supposed to be an elegant, formal setting. There it was. The truth behind the carefully constructed facade of polite prejudice. Her hair wasn't wild and untamed," I said quietly. "It was beautifully styled in its natural texture. The texture she was born with. The texture she inherited from me." Catherine waved a dismissive hand. "I didn't come here to argue about hairstyling choices. I came to discuss the money you've withdrawn without warning. Elizabeth has already committed to vendors. Invitations have been ordered. You've put us in an impossible position. I'm sure you'll figure something out. Perhaps you could consider a smaller event, one within your actual means." Her eyes flashed. "Is that what this is about? Humiliating us? Forcing us to admit financial difficulty?" "No, Catherine. It's about consequences. It's about showing my daughter that I won't financially support people who treat her as less than." I paused, then added, "It's also about teaching her that writing checks is not the same as buying acceptance." Catherine's posture stiffened. "James doesn't know the full extent of your contributions to our family events, does he?" The implied threat was clear. "Feel free to tell him," I replied calmly. "In fact, I encourage it. While you're at it, explain why you felt the need to hide it from him in the first place. Why you insisted our arrangement remain between us girls." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. I continued. "Was it because you knew he'd be ashamed to learn his mother was taking money from his black wife to fund the very events where that wife and her daughter were made to feel unwelcome? Or because it would shatter his image of the Walker-Johnson legacy to know it's being propped up by new money from someone you consider beneath you?" Catherine stood abruptly. "I see there's no reasoning with you. I had hoped we could resolve this like adults. But clearly, you're determined to be difficult." "Not difficult, Catherine. Just clear about my boundaries. I won't be writing any more checks for family events. Not until there's a sincere acknowledgement of how Zoe was treated and genuine change in how she's included." She gathered her designer handbag, her movements stiff with anger. "You're making a mistake. Family is about compromise, about looking past small offenses for the greater good. What happened wasn't a small offense. It was a defining moment. And the greater good includes my daughter's sense of self-worth." At the door, Catherine paused. "James called me this morning. You know, he's concerned about your behavior, about how your emotional response might affect Zoe." The statement was designed to wound, to make me question myself. 5 years ago, it might have worked. Now, I simply nodded. "I'm sure he is. And I'm concerned about how his failure to stand up for his daughter might affect her. I guess we both have things to think about." After Catherine left, I sat at my desk, hands trembling slightly with the aftermath of adrenaline. I hadn't raised my voice once, had maintained complete professional composure, yet I felt as if I'd been in a physical fight. My phone buzzed with a text from James. "Mom just called, said you were hostile and unreasonable. We need to talk tonight." I set the phone down without responding and turned back to my work, but the words swam before my eyes. After a few futile minutes, I gave up and called my closest friend, Itasha. "Can you pick Zoe up from her after-school program and keep her for dinner?" I asked when she answered. "James and I need to have a conversation that's not kid-appropriate." "Of course," Tasha replied without hesitation. "Want to tell me what's going on?" I gave her the condensed version of the weekend's events. Tasha, who had known me since college and had attended enough uncomfortable gatherings with James's family to understand the dynamics at play, listened in growing indignation. "The laundry room," she repeated, her voice rising. "They made her eat in the damn laundry room because of her hair? Oh, hell no." "Exactly. And James stayed. After you left?" "He did." Tasha was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" It was the question I'd been avoiding since Saturday night. What was I going to do? About James? About our marriage? About the future? "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I know what I'm not going to do, which is continue pretending this is normal or acceptable." "Good," Tasha said firmly. "And for what it's worth, I'm proud of you for taking a stand. Zoe needs to see that." After we hung up, I texted James that Zoe would be at Tasha's for dinner, and we needed to talk when he got home. Then I shut down my computer, gathered my things, and left the office early for the first time in months. At home, I moved methodically through the house, a strange clarity guiding my actions. I pulled financial documents from the office filing cabinet, bank statements, investment accounts, property deeds. I created 2 neat stacks on the dining room table, mine, ours. What Catherine didn't know, what even James didn't fully appreciate, was exactly how our family finances were structured. While we maintained joint accounts for household expenses, the majority of my earnings remained in separate accounts. It had been James's idea initially, a way to protect my growing business from any potential liabilities associated with his architectural projects. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very arrangement he'd insisted on to protect my assets from his problems now meant I had complete control over the funds Catherine had come to rely on. I heard James's key in the door at exactly 6:30. His footsteps were heavy as he entered the house, pausing when he saw me sitting at the dining room table with the documents spread before me. "What's all this?" he asked, setting down his briefcase. "Financial clarity," I replied. "Before we talk, I wanted to make sure we both understand exactly where things stand." He loosened his tie, wariness in his expression. "Feels like you're preparing for battle." "I'm preparing for an honest conversation." James sank into the chair across from me. He looked tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from trying to please everyone and failing. In another context, I might have felt sympathy. Now, I simply waited, "Mom's upset," he finally said. "I know. She says you closed the family event account without warning, that Elizabeth has already committed to expenses for the holiday party." I nodded. "That's correct." James ran a hand through his hair. "Elise, I understand you're angry about what happened at the party, but this feels vindictive. It's punishing the whole family for my mother's mistake." "It wasn't a mistake, James. It was a deliberate choice that revealed exactly how she sees our daughter. She's old-fashioned. She has certain ideas about presentation and appearance. It doesn't mean she doesn't love Zoe." I stared at him, suddenly exhausted by the mental gymnastics he was performing to avoid the obvious. "Your mother made our daughter eat in a laundry room because her black features didn't fit the aesthetic she wanted. Zoe asked me if she looked dirty. If that's love, it's a kind I don't recognize and won't accept." James flinched. "When you put it that way, there is no other way to put it. That's what happened." He was silent for a long moment. "So, what now? You cut off the family financially and we just never see them again? That depends on them and on you. On me? What's that supposed to mean?" I took a deep breath. "It means I need to know where you stand, James. Not where you're trying to stand to keep everyone happy, but where you actually stand. Are you with me and Zoe, or are you with your mother's old-fashioned ideas about how your daughter should look to be acceptable?" James looked genuinely conflicted, which told me everything I needed to know. "It's not that black and white," he protested. "In this case, it quite literally is." He winced at the pun, unintentional as it was. "I love Zoe more than anything," he said. "You know that. I know you love her. What I don't know is if you're willing to protect her, even when it's uncomfortable. Even when it means standing up to your family." "Of course I am," he insisted, but there was a hesitancy in his voice that made my heart sink. "Then why didn't you?" I asked quietly. "Why didn't you say something when your mother suggested Zoe eat in the laundry room? Why didn't you leave with us when you saw how upset she was?" James looked away. "I was caught off guard. I didn't think it through. I made a mistake. A mistake that taught our daughter her father won't stand up for her." He flinched again. "That's not fair. None of this is fair, James. Especially not to Zoe." We sat in silence, the weight of everything unspoken pressing down between us. Finally, James gestured to the documents on the table. "What is all this? Really? Are you planning to leave me?" The directness of the question surprised me. "I'm planning to be prepared for whatever happens next. Right now, I don't know what that is." "What do you want to happen?" I considered the question carefully. "I want our daughter to grow up feeling beautiful, valued, and worthy exactly as she is. I want her to know her parents will always protect her dignity, even when, especially when, others try to diminish her. And I want to be with a partner who shares those priorities without hesitation." James reached across the table, his hand stopping short of mine. "I do want those things, Elise. I swear I do. I wasn't raised to confront problems head-on. In my family, we smooth things over. We don't make scenes. Even when smoothing things over causes harm." "I didn't see it that way in the moment," he admitted. "I was thinking about keeping peace, not about the message it sent to Zoe." I studied his face, searching for sincerity, for understanding. "And now, do you see it now?" "Yes," he said quietly. "I do. And I'm ashamed." It was the first honest thing he'd said all evening. "What happens next depends on what you do with that shame," I told him. "Whether you use it to actually change or just to feel bad temporarily before going back to the same patterns." James nodded slowly. "I want to do better. I need to do better. For Zoe's sake, I hope you mean that." I gathered the documents, returning them to their folders. "I'm not closing any doors tonight, James, but I'm not making any promises either. I need to see real change, not just hear about intentions." Later that night, after James had gone to pick up Zoe from Tasha's, I sat alone in our bedroom, thinking about the countless small compromises I'd made over the years. The comments I'd let slide, the traditions I'd adapted to, the efforts I'd made to fit into a family that had never truly accepted me, or, by extension, my daughter. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it, expecting spam, but found a message from Elizabeth, James's sister. "Elise, I want you to know I think what happened to Zoe was wrong. I should have said something. I'm sorry I didn't. If you're willing to talk, I'd like to meet just us." I stared at the message. surprised. Elizabeth had always been polite but distant, following her mother's lead in most things. This independent outreach was unexpected. Before I could decide whether to respond, I heard Zoe's laughter floating up the stairs. She was telling James about something funny that had happened at Tasha's. The sound of her joy, so pure and resilient after everything that had happened, brought tears to my eyes. Whatever came next, with James, with his family, with our marriage, would be guided by one principle alone: protecting that laughter, that joy, that sense of wholeness in my daughter. Everything else was secondary. I sent a quick reply to Elizabeth. "We can meet. Let me know when and where." Then I went downstairs to hug my daughter and listen to her stories, pushing thoughts of Catherine, of family finances, of marital uncertainty to tomorrow. For tonight, Zoe's smile was enough. Elizabeth suggested meeting at a small cafe downtown, far from her usual haunts in the more exclusive part of town. I arrived early, choosing a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. Part of me, the part that had been burned too many times by the Walker-Johnson family dynamics, half expected Catherine to appear instead, staging an ambush intervention. But it was Elizabeth who walked in precisely at noon, wearing a simple blazer and jeans rather than her usual country club attire. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she carried a leather portfolio under her arm. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. Her voice lacked its usual crisp confidence. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I admitted, "but I'm curious about what you have to say." The waitress came by to take our orders. Elizabeth asked for just water, then changed her mind and ordered a coffee. Small signs of nervousness that made her seem more human than the polished facade she usually presented. "I owe you an apology," she began once the waitress left. "What happened to Zoe at Mom's party was inexcusable. I should have spoken up." I studied her face for signs of insincerity but found none. "Why didn't you?" Elizabeth sighed, twisting her wedding ring, a modest band compared to the ostentatious diamonds her friends sported. I'd always suspected her husband Tom's law practice wasn't as lucrative as the family pretended. "The easy answer is that I'm a coward," she said. "The more complicated answer is that I've spent my entire life trying not to rock my mother's boat. Even when she's steering it directly into a child?" Elizabeth winced. "Especially then. Mom's views on appearance have shaped our family for as long as I can remember. You haven't seen the worst of it." This caught my attention. "What do you mean?" She opened the portfolio and pulled out what appeared to be a family photograph from perhaps 20 years ago. A younger Catherine stood with her husband and children. Elizabeth, maybe 12 at the time, stood slightly apart from the group. "This was the only formal portrait where I was allowed to appear with my natural hair color," she explained. "I was born with red hair, bright copper red, not blonde like Mom and James, not brown like Dad, just different." I stared at the photo, noticing for the first time the reddish tint to young Elizabeth's hair. "I had no idea you weren't naturally blonde." "I've been dyeing it since I was 13, she said with a sad smile. Mom insisted. Said it was distracting and made me look adopted. By 14, I was getting professional highlights every 6 weeks. The parallel was unmistakable, and it shifted something in my understanding of the family I'd married into. "I'm not comparing my experience to Zoe's," Elizabeth continued quickly. "So what happened to her was far worse. And has racial dimensions my situation obviously doesn't. I want you to know that I understand, in some small way, what it feels like to be told your natural appearance is unacceptable. Why are you telling me this now?" Elizabeth closed the portfolio. "Because I can't be complicit anymore." When I saw Zoe's face as she was being led to the laundry room, the confusion, the hurt, it brought back every feeling of shame I experienced growing up. And I stood there and did nothing, just like everyone did nothing for me. "So this is about your healing, not Zoe's." "It's about both," she admitted. "And it's about stopping the cycle. I have 2 daughters now. I don't want them growing up thinking their worth is tied to how they look in family photographs." I considered her words, searching for manipulation but finding what seemed like genuine remorse. "What exactly are you proposing, Elizabeth?" She straightened her shoulders. "First, I want Zoe to know her Aunt Elizabeth thinks she's perfect exactly as she is. Second, I want to stand with you in demanding change from my mother. And third," she hesitated, then pushed forward, "I want to help find another way to fund the family events without putting that burden on you. You know about the financial arrangement, I stated rather than asked. Elizabeth nodded. I've known for a while. Mom isn't as discreet as she thinks when she's had a few glasses of wine. She told me how generous you were, how you were, finally contributing something worthwhile to the family legacy. The casual cruelty of Catherine's words stung, even secondhand. I started looking into our family finances after that. Elizabeth continued. What I found, she shook her head. Let's just say Mom and Dad's financial situation isn't what they pretend it is. They've been living beyond their means for years, even with your contributions. This wasn't news to me, but hearing it confirmed by Catherine's own daughter was validating. So what are you suggesting? That you take over funding the Walker-Johnson social calendar? No, Elizabeth said firmly. And I'm suggesting we scale back dramatically. Host gatherings that reflect our actual means, not our pretensions. Stop trying to compete with families who have genuine wealth. I raised an eyebrow. Your mother will never agree to that. She might not have a choice. Not if I can convince Dad to be honest about their financial reality. And not if you and I present a united front. The idea of having an ally within the family, especially one who understood Catherine's tactics from the inside, was tempting. But years of navigating these waters had taught me caution. And James? Where does he stand in all this? Elizabeth's expression softened. He's caught between worlds. Always has been. Mom's golden boy who never quite lives up to her expectations. He's terrified of disappointing her, but he's even more terrified of losing you and Zoe. He called me crying the night after the party. This was news to me. James hadn't shed a single tear in my presence, had approached the whole situation as a problem to be managed rather than a wound to be healed. He said he keeps replaying the moment Zoe asked if she looked dirty, Elizabeth continued, that he can't forgive himself for not standing up for her immediately. I felt a complicated tangle of emotions. Relief that James was taking this seriously. Anger that he'd shown vulnerability to his sister but not to me. Hope that perhaps he understood the gravity of what had happened. I appreciate you telling me this, I said carefully. And I'm open to working together to create healthier family dynamics for all our children. But Elizabeth, I need you to understand something crucial. She nodded, waiting. I will never again allow Zoe to be treated as less than by anyone in the family. Not for family peace, not for tradition, not for any reason. If that means we don't attend certain events or maintain certain relationships, so be it. Her well-being is non-negotiable. I understand completely, Elizabeth said, and I respect that boundary. In fact, I want to help enforce it. We spent the next hour outlining a plan. Elizabeth would talk to her father about the family finances while I would focus on setting clear expectations with James about how we would engage with his family moving forward. We would both refuse to participate in any event where every child wasn't treated with equal dignity. As we prepared to leave, Elizabeth hesitated. There's one more thing you should know. Mom's planning to come to your house tonight to talk to James privately. I overheard her on the phone with him this morning. A familiar tension knotted in my stomach. Behind my back. Yes, she thinks if she can get him alone, she can convince him to bring you to your senses and about the money. I thanked Elizabeth for the warning and headed straight back to my office. The knowledge that Catherine and James were planning a private conversation about me, about our finances, about our marriage, filled me with a cold resolve. By 5 o'clock, I had rearranged my schedule, picked Zoe up early from her after-school program, and packed an overnight bag for both of us. Are we going on a trip? Zoe asked excitedly as we drove away from our neighborhood. A mini vacation, I told her with a smile I didn't quite feel. We're going to stay with Aunt Tasha tonight. Maybe order pizza and watch movies. How does that sound? Amazing, she declared, already moving on from the question of why we were suddenly having a sleepover on a Tuesday. I texted James once we were settled at Tasha's. Zoe and I are staying with Tasha tonight. I understand your mother is coming over to speak with you privately. When you're ready to include me in conversations about our family and finances, let me know. His response came almost immediately. Elise, it's not what you think. Please come home. We can talk to Mom together. I didn't reply. Instead, I focused on Zoe, on her excited chatter as she and Tasha's daughter planned their movie marathon, on her beautiful curls as she tilted her head back in laughter, on the sparkle in her eyes that contained not a trace of the hurt I'd seen in them Saturday night. Some battles needed to be fought head-on. Others required strategic retreat to gain clarity. Tonight, I needed James to face his mother alone, without me there to mediate or smooth things over, to see her manipulations without the buffer of my diplomatic presence. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. But tonight, my daughter and I would be surrounded only by people who celebrated every part of her exactly as she was. When morning came, my phone showed 7 missed calls from James and a single text message sent at 1:38 a.m. "You were right. About everything. Please come home when you're ready. We need to talk." I took my time, helped Zoe get ready for school, thanked Tasha for the emergency sanctuary, drove to my office and cleared my morning schedule. Only then, at nearly 11, did I pull into our driveway. James's car was still there. He hadn't gone to work. A small act of prioritization that shouldn't have felt significant, but somehow did. He was sitting at the kitchen table, staring into a cold cup of coffee. When he looked up, I saw something I'd never seen before in our decade together. Absolute clarity in his eyes. No conflicted loyalty, no desperate people-pleasing calculation, just certainty. "Thank you for coming back," he said, standing awkwardly. "I wasn't sure you would." I set my purse on the counter. "What happened with your mother?" James gestured for me to sit. When I did, he pushed a folder toward me, one I recognized as containing our financial documents. "She came over around 7, he began. At first, she was all sympathy and concern. Poor James, with his difficult wife. Poor James, caught in the middle. How hard this must be for me. He shook his head, a look of disgust crossing his features. And I almost fell for it, almost. What changed? She started talking about money, about how you were holding the family hostage by withdrawing financial support. That's when it clicked. She was describing funds I didn't even know existed. I nodded slowly. The family events account. Yes. When I asked her to explain, she got flustered, started talking about how you'd volunteered to contribute into family gatherings. But the numbers she mentioned, he looked at me directly. Elise, have you been funding my family's entire social calendar for years? Not entirely, I said. But significantly, yes. Why didn't you tell me? It was a fair question. At first, because your mother asked me not to. She approached me privately, and I respected what I thought was her pride. Later, I hesitated, then decided complete honesty was the only way forward. Later, I think I knew on some level that if you understood the full extent of the financial relationship, it would force a reckoning about the social dynamic that neither of us was ready for. James ran his hands through his hair. And all this time, she's been taking your money while treating you and Zoe as if you should be grateful for a seat at her table. His voice cracked with emotion. A table you were literally paying for. It's more complicated than that, I said, though part of me appreciated the simplicity of his assessment. No, it's not. James's voice was firm. Last night, after I confronted her about the money, she showed her true colors. Do you know what she said when I told her how hurt Zoe was by being sent to the laundry room? That children are resilient and Zoe would get over it. That I needed to think about the family reputation and how certain appearances matter in our social circle. I felt a familiar knot in my stomach. That sounds like Catherine. Then she said something I can't unhear. James looked down at his hands. She said that if we weren't careful about how Zoe was presented at family functions, people might think she was the help rather than a Walker Johnson. The casual cruelty stole my breath. She said that. Those exact words. James nodded, his face ashen. That's when I asked her to leave. Told her she wasn't welcome in our home until she could see her granddaughter for the beautiful, perfect child she is. I sat back, processing this unexpected development. How did she take that? Not well. A grim smile crossed his face. She said I was choosing them over real family, that I'd regret alienating the Walker Johnson connections. Then she threatened to change her will. I couldn't help but laugh. What exactly does she think she's leaving you? The mortgage on a house they can barely afford. Exactly. James's expression turned serious. Elise, I've been blind, willfully blind to how my family has treated you and Zoe, to the power dynamics at play, to my own cowardice in confronting it. I studied his face, looking for the sincerity behind the words. What changed, really? 2 things, he said without hesitation. First, seeing the photo. What photo? James pulled out his phone, opening it to an image I hadn't seen before. It showed Zoe sitting alone in Catherine's laundry room, her small shoulders hunched, her face turned away from the camera. One of the household staff must have taken it surreptitiously. Elizabeth sent it to me yesterday, he explained. Said I needed to really see what happened, not the sanitized version Mom was presenting. The image broke my heart all over again. And the second thing? Waking up this morning to an empty house. His voice was quiet. Realizing I might have lost you both because I couldn't stand up to my mother, that I was repeating a pattern my father set, prioritizing her approval over everything, including his children's emotional well-being. He reached across the table, not quite touching my hand. I can't undo what happened at the party. I can't erase the moment I failed to protect Zoe, but I can promise you, with absolute certainty, that it will never happen again. I wanted to believe him. After a decade together, I knew James was fundamentally kind, if conflict avoidant to a fault. But good intentions weren't enough when it came to protecting our daughter. What exactly are you proposing, James? He straightened, as if he'd prepared for this question. First, we establish clear boundaries with my family. Zoe is never subjected to any different treatment than the other grandchildren. Her appearance is never commented on negatively. These are non-negotiable conditions for our participation in any family event. I nodded. And if those boundaries are crossed, we leave immediately, both of us, together. His gaze was steady. And we don't return until there's a genuine apology and changed behavior. Your mother will test those boundaries immediately. I know, and I'm prepared for that. He hesitated, then continued. Second, no more secret financial arrangements. I've been looking at our numbers this morning. The amount you've been contributing to my family's events could fund Zoe's entire college education, or a summer home where we could make our own family memories. The thought had occurred to me more than once over the years. And third, James continued, I think we need outside help, both as a couple and for me individually. I've spent my whole life navigating around my mother's moods and expectations. I need tools to break that pattern. It was perhaps the most self-aware statement I'd ever heard him make. I'm not asking you to trust me right away, he added when I remained silent. I'm asking for the chance to prove, through actions, that I can be the husband and father you both deserve. I considered his words carefully. The path forward wasn't simple reconciliation or clean breaks. It was the messy, complicated work of reshaping family dynamics while protecting the most vulnerable among us. I need you to understand something, James, I said finally. This isn't just about one incident at one party. It's about the cumulative effect of these experiences on Zoe's self-image, on how she sees herself in the world. I know, he said softly. No, I don't think you do. I leaned forward, making sure he heard every word. When a child is repeatedly made to feel an other man by her own family, when her appearance is treated as something to be hidden or fixed or apologized for, it creates wounds that last a lifetime. Wounds I know intimately, because I carry them too. James's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, Elise. I'm not telling you this for an apology. I'm telling you because I need you to understand that protecting Zoe isn't just about standing up to your mother in the moment. It's about actively celebrating who she is. It's about making sure she never questions her beauty or her belonging, especially in spaces where people look like you and not like us. He nodded, absorbing my words. I want to do that. I want to be that father for her. Then show me, I said simply. Not just today, in the aftermath of a crisis, but consistently, in small moments and big ones. The conversation continued as we moved from the kitchen to the living room, then out to the back porch as afternoon stretched toward evening. We talked about Catherine, about Elizabeth's surprising alliance, about the financial entanglements that needed unraveling, about family therapy and individual counseling, about what it would take to rebuild trust. By the time we needed to pick up Zoe from school, we had the outline of a path forward. Not perfect, not final, but honest in a way our relationship hadn't been for years. Should I tell her we're coming home? James asked as we got into separate cars. I considered the question. No. Let's ask what she wants. She deserves a voice in this too. When we arrived at the school, Zoe's face registered surprise at seeing both of us together. As she approached, I noticed something different. She'd styled her hair herself today, pulling it back with the butterfly clips but leaving most of her curls free and wild. A small act of self-determination that made my heart swell with pride. Are you guys done fighting? She asked directly, her perceptiveness catching us both off guard. James knelt to her level. We've been working through some grown-up problems, he said. But we both love you very much, and we want to know what you'd like to do tonight. We could go back to Aunt Tasha's, or we could all go home together. Zoe considered this carefully. Can we get ice cream first? And can I wear my hair however I want to Grandma's next party? James didn't hesitate. Yes to both. And Zoe? Your hair is beautiful exactly how it is. I should have told you that at Grandma's party, and I'm sorry I didn't. She studied his face with the unfiltered assessment only children can manage. It's okay, Daddy. Sometimes grown-ups mess up. Then she added with the wisdom of her 8 years, but you have to fix it when you do. I'm trying, sweetheart, he promised. I'm really trying. As we drove to the ice cream shop, Zoe chattering happily from the back seat, I thought about the journey ahead. Rebuilding trust with James, establishing new boundaries with Catherine, supporting Elizabeth's efforts to create healthier family dynamics. None of it would be easy. But watching Zoe in the rearview mirror, her curls bouncing as she explained the plot of a book she was reading at school, her face animated with confidence and joy, I knew with absolute certainty that it was worth fighting for. 3 weeks later, an invitation arrived for the annual Walker Johnson Summer Barbecue. Usually an elaborate catered affair at the country club, this year's event was being hosted at Elizabeth's more modest home, with a note explaining it would be a casual potluck where everyone contributes. At the bottom, in Elizabeth's handwriting, all family welcome exactly as they are. No dress code, no photo requirements, just love and acceptance. I showed it to James, who had spent the intervening weeks in twice-weekly therapy sessions and daily demonstrations of his commitment to change. "Are we going?" he asked, leaving the decision entirely to me. I looked out to the backyard where Zoe was teaching herself cartwheels, her curls flying wild and free in the summer breeze. In 3 weeks, she hadn't once asked if her hair looked okay, or if she needed to fix it before leaving the house. Yes, I decided. We'll go. Together. I didn't add the silent condition that hung between us. And at the first sign of Catherine's old behavior, we'd leave together too. James understood without it being said. That night, as I balanced our household accounts, I noticed the family events fund, now renamed Zoe's Future, had grown substantially. With no more checks being written to fund Catherine's social aspirations, we were accumulating savings at an impressive rate. Enough, perhaps, for the summer home James had mentioned. A place where we could create our own traditions, where our daughter could run free, hair wild in the wind, never questioning her beauty or her belonging. Or perhaps it would fund a scholarship for girls with curly hair who needed to be reminded of their worth in a world that too often tried to straighten them out. Either way, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never again write a check for any gathering where my daughter wasn't celebrated exactly as she was. Glorious curls and all.